What's up, rollers? It is me, Marshall, once again. And you may be wondering, where is Franny? And that's actually due to the fact that, unfortunately, just leading into this, it was Franny's last days at his old position. And unfortunately, before this episode could get out, we couldn't get through an episode while he was before he left, and while he was on the clock still, essentially consistently for days in a row. So here we are. It's solo today, but definitely for some of the last times, which will be really nice. But what we're going to be talking about today, because I'm getting ahead of myself and holding my prop here, what we're going to be talking about today is a few things. So we're going to start with kind of a small state of Natural One, just kind of updates and certain things like that. Then we are going to get into our main topic, which is going to be essentially whether or not are books worth it? Like, are these our physical books worth it? And then finally, I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of just some, in a way, personal talk, but personal talk that's relative to actually Natural One and things like that. So we'll get into that. Don't worry. All right. So the first start of kind of current state of Nat One, something I just kind of, if this was like a student council meeting, this would be the notes in a way. So some of the things I just want to talk about, one of the things that we are going to be doing very soon, in fact, I am doing it the day this episode comes out, is in order for us to, I think, both kind of be able to be more present as trying to, make something like this work, and for us to truly be a haven of D&D and people to come and enjoy themselves, we are going to, I think, make a better effort this year in terms of just even being more available for other things. So while we cannot make all of the content in the world, because essentially I am, for example, trying to attempt to get as much jobs as much work as I humanly can, so that I do not lose the things that I own and I can pay my bills. Inevitably, both of us are going to run into our periods of struggle. Hence why, Franny, for example, the reason I make all of these solo podcasts, and Franny oftentimes probably doesn't, is mainly just because I have a lot of this equipment right here ready for me, and Franny doesn't have the same, I have essentially the same baseline of everything that we have, which is why I'm going to be putting Franny's finally going to have the time to kind of go through a boot camp, so that both of us will be able to kind of create more content on our own one way or another. It won't always look super amazing, and we won't always have the best camera equipment every time, especially the videos that Franny will likely make on his own one way or another, but that we will one way or another be making content more consistently and more availably, especially on social media, which is something that we would like to improve upon going into this year. Other than that, the best thing that you can always do if you would like to help us grow and be able to do more cool things more often is to share this channel with more people. We would like to make more content that isn't just this podcast and the live shows. Unfortunately, these are things that are just hard to do unless we can get people who are engaging with the content and giving us more and more reasons to do this. So if you like our content, you like what we create, even if it was things like origin stories, we would love to make more of those, but we need more support in order to do that. So if you can just even share our channel, get us out there, get the word of us and what we do out there, that'd be super amazing, and definitely help us out more than anything else you could do. Other than that, let's get into our main topic here, which is going to be the one question I was kind of thinking about somewhat recently, which was I was looking at a lot of books on my shelf, and I was looking at and I was at Half Price Books with Franny, actually. We went after we were celebrating his birthday, and before we celebrated someone else's birthday. And we were looking at Half Price Books, which is a nice, amazing store for old D&D stuff. I bought a Libra Mortis from 3.5. It's my favorite book from that because it had one of my favorite prestige classes of all time, which is the Pale Master. Something that kind of the Necromancy School wanted to kind of copy, but it just didn't do it nearly the same justice. However, I love that book, and it's something that I've always loved using. And in finding like secondhand bookstores can be amazing for finding old Dungeons and Dragons material. I couldn't get it at a time, but one time I found one at one of those stores. I did find a Book of Evil and Book of Vile Darkness, and that was awesome. I would have loved to buy those. At the time I couldn't, which is a real shame. But it got me thinking a little bit. You know, you look at buying old books is something that's really easy to justify because there isn't a D&D Beyond with 3.5 stuff. And it got me thinking, why? And because I don't attempt to own nearly as much 5th edition books as I do 3.5 edition books, and potentially even 4th edition books if you were so inclined to own that. And a lot of that honestly is because, you know, there is so much easier access to information for 5th edition than there ever was for 3.5. And to be honest, I think that's a lot of the reason that D&D has succeeded amazingly well in 5th edition. You know, it has exceeded, I think, either of the last 2 editions by far in terms of popularity, and in terms of just baseline numbers, it's probably exceeded every edition ever, you know, but and that's just due to a population factor. But, you know, in terms of like where you can get your information though, and then how to play the game and how to learn it, there's so many resources for 5th edition at this point. Like if I wanted to go and get essentially information about a player's handbook for how to get started in 3.5, I need to go find the actual player's handbook, right? I would have to go and get one and find the book, you know. Definitely not a PDF online somewhere. But, you know, otherwise, but for 5th edition, you know, there are way more, if anything, sometimes if I really wanted to, I potentially could find some decent information on YouTube through tutorials, which is something we would like to do in the near future here. You know, otherwise there is plenty of different like wikis and stuff that have baseline information for you just to kind of know and figure things out. Otherwise, you know, there's other info that you can kind of get pieced together if you can't afford a book. Otherwise, there is amazing sources like the Essentials Kit, the Basic Kit, things you can buy then also online. You know, $30 is for a digital copy of the Player's Handbook. You know, don't get the one from Amazon, because why would you do that? I don't really care. But I would argue if you're going to look for a $30 version of the book, I would get the digital version over one from Amazon, because and that also is partly where that question continued to go. So it's like, so what is the determining factor? What is the reason that you should get a physical book, like a real hardcover book? See, feel this like this? That's hardcover. Why get one of these? Why get a book that when you find it in a store, when you find this in a store, not this, well, this one actually, yes, but even the regular cover version of this, any of these books, why would you go and get a $50 book for what's sometimes not even a, you know, as thick of a book? Like some adventure books are pretty small compared to this. You know, why would you do that? Why would you go and get a book that is $50, which granted, $50 for a decent sized book, to be fair. But why? Why do that when you can get a digital version for $30, for $20 less? That is $20. That's almost another book. You can almost get 2 books for the price of one. Well, why would you get anything else? And I think a lot of it goes into finding it starts by discussing kind of with yourself. And not only that, but then so mainly discussing with yourself, what is the purpose of you having this book? Like, what is your goal with it? I often argue I would argue a big reason to make the investment, that extra $20 investment, and getting a physical version of the Player's Handbook is because it is really easy to hand it over to somebody. If you are playing in person, it's very easy. Like, so if you are consistently a at the table player, right, you are running a group at a table, in front of each other, with each other, which is a way I very much recommend playing if you want to try to get the opportunity to do so. But essentially, if you're generally playing with people in a circle on a table, it is much easier to hand somebody a book, especially the player's handbook, which will often be referenced. It is way easier to hand them this than to point them into a spot if they don't have the materials themselves. A big thing that honestly really matters a lot is if you want to be a DM or even just somebody that helps foster new players, not forcing them to get their own copy of the book is really important. I didn't get a player's handbook of 3rd edition, and I ended up getting a 3rd edition version instead of the 3.5 one. So regardless, I oopsied. I got it for again at a half price, so I didn't pay for that much. But the thing is that, like, what's the word? What are the words? Words are escaping me. If you want to help foster new players, you having a book for yourself to use with yourself is very important. And not only just to use with yourself, but to hand to somebody who is new. Because what happened to me was when I started, I had to constantly hug the player's handbook with me. And yeah, sure, then that should mean like I should have bought one. But, I was in high school. I was early high school with no job. How was I going to pay for that? My parents were going to go run out and buy D&D books. They just weren't, So as a result, like, I had to make do with what I could, and that was by being able to borrow and use books during sessions, when I could. And that's what was awesome about it, is that it was just that ability to be able to, always look at the book when I needed it, but not having to worry about committing on buying anything just to get in. The only thing I ended up buying on my own was just my first set of dice, which, everybody inevitably should do that, because that costs like $6 or whatever, like it's very inevitably you should be able to do that. You should not. It has been one of my opinions that you should, if you are 3 sessions in, you need to buy your own dice. Because by that point, you are not sampling this game anymore. You're in it. Buy your own dice. For just even superstition's sake, buy your own dice. But otherwise, honestly, a big thing that I do recommend is, when you're new, is being able to just look at it, be able to see a book and just always have it near you or available to you, and not having to worry about being committed. Now, a counter argument that would be made to that is most of these people likely may have technology. They may have a tablet, they may have an iPad, a laptop, most likely a laptop, if anything. It is very likely that they, have some way to connect to the internet. And as long as you own the book on D&D Beyond, then you can share content with your players if you bring them into your campaign. Because D&D Beyond is entirely built in a way to play it. It is not like D&D Beyond is not like Roll20, where you build the characters in game and you build and you allow the characters to flourish, kind of, or they go onto a map and that play mat and whatever. D&D Beyond is just amalgamate. A D&D Beyond campaign is just an amalgamation of character sheets, just so your DM can have access to all of your character sheets. Now, I will note, side note, slight detraction, but just a note, or not a detraction, but a sidetrack is, no matter how much you love to keep secrets from your party members, for your DM's sake, make your characters public, because it's way easier to just use the character tab to switch between all your characters than to not. So please, for your DM's sake, make your characters public. In reality, you shouldn't be putting too much. There's a lot of space on your character sheet as well for you to still hide things from your fellow players. Just because they can see your character sheet doesn't mean that they can read everything. Also, point to that. Back on track here. yeah, so while you can, bring new players in, let them be able to see and just search whatever they want, because a big plus to D&D Beyond and any other, online resource is just, I want to know what everything I can do on, like, I want to know everything I can do with a bonus action, type it in, or type in rogue bonus action, if you're a rogue. You can type in things that you really want. I'm frightened. What does that mean? I'm going to just type frightened instead of needing to go search for it in the book, That's, a big thing. Like, that is something that can really matter, because it's really hard a lot of times to know where you need to look for a lot of information. But if you're a new player, most of the time, you only really need to look for, like, you as a player should only really need to look for things that are pertaining to your character. Something like knowing what happens to you when you're frightened, knowing what happens to you if you're prone, status, any other status effects, how cones work. That's something that should be more, that onus should be way more on your DM. And they should be the ones that kind of give you the guidelines of how they want that to be set up, because inherently they're the ones that kind of establish the rules of the setting and inevitably can change those as you go along. So in reality, really all you need is specific character things. So I would argue that despite, while, outside of potentially some extraneous needs, I would argue for the most part that the biggest thing that you need for a new player is just the baseline information. So in which case, then having a physical book is a lot of times just easier. Inevitably, then you're able just to point them right to a page. Hey, we'll just check the fighter section, see what the feat says, see what the feature says. I know it's arguably potentially the same amount of time, but just the accessibility of having the book right there and just being able to, like, just especially not making them look it up, but just being able to be like, open page, like open to the right page, hand them the book, right? That's where the person to person, like, assistance comes in. But now, is that worth, the other way I would say potentially not using D&D Beyond does kind of make it worse is if you do a lot of homebrewing, especially homebrew classes. Because, for example, you look at DM's Guild, there's so many cool classes, but you can't homebrew a full class in D&D Beyond. You can only do subclasses. And I've tried to transfer subclasses to D&D Beyond, and it's a chore. It is a real chore. And it's obviously the other issues is that they're finicky. Sometimes you will get abbreviated information that's kind of misleading. So it'll because it won't give you all of the details exactly as to how it works until you click on it. So, but the blurb is often what you're going to look at as your source of that information until you have it memorized. And that's why, like, just having a book with a bookmarked book can sometimes be useful, because inevitably then just when you crack open the book, you just look at exactly the section that you need to look for in your character sheet. I don't remember, what does this ability do again? I looked at my abilities hundreds and hundreds of times. Also, you can take a picture of the book, obviously. So if you know that there's abilities that you constantly have to re-reference, then just go do that. Spells is another downside in terms of the book itself. Spells are really easy spells are really hard to remember, and they're really easy to lose track of. They're absolutely, D&D Beyond is one of the best things about that. Figuring out how many spells, what the spells you have are, what they do, because you can list them out, but there's only so much space to actually write their effects. It's, and some of them are long. It's hard to just write that down verbatim. So definitely that's where, like, the things like a digital character sheet, and not only that, but even just a digital resource, searching Fireball is inevitably much easier than trying to find Fireball in the actual sheet. And I know I haven't been holding up the player's handbook, but that's because I wanted this prop for one of my other reasons as to maybe why you would want a physical version, which is specifically if you want a nice cover. I know this is very aesthetic and this is very superficial, but there is very much something to be said about having books, about having D&D books, right? There's very much something to be said about the look that it gives, right? If you want to be like, I love D&D, like I am a huge D&D fan. If you own 0 physical books, especially none that have like really cool artwork on it, like that are available now, like some of this artwork that they come out with, these are so cool. There's always so many interesting details about them that make them interesting. They're fun talking points. Like for example, with this one, right? You can tell people, yeah, the original cover has like a boat. You're like on a little boat, and it's somebody like pointing a bow and arrow at this creature. And so then when they came out with this is the perspective of that archer who is trying to shoot this creature as it's going blah at them. And the other thing that's really cool you can bring up is facts like about this icon, right? This is very much not the way that they design their logos anymore for book covers. But this is a lot like the way that they used to. And that's because much of this book is a throwback. Very much a lot of this book is a throwback to older editions. It kind of is, it kind of has areas and interest in locations that very much, I think, are referential to what I believe was Greyhawk. So, and essentially the first edition land, and that's something that's really, really cool to bring up, and that's something that is in there. And again, like I said, there is something to be said about having kind of that type of interesting thing. Like, I know having limited editions are entirely marketing BS that's just made for us to buy things, but also in reality, like, these books cost no more. I paid no more for this than if I bought the regular Ghost of Saltmarsh at a game store, right? I paid no more for this than that one. And it's just because these are limited supply. That's the big factor about it. It's just, these are limited, they're of limited supply. Therefore, you will only see them for so long, and then their value inevitably goes up, if you were to resell them. But I would argue you shouldn't buy them just to resell them. It's a low move. It's a low blow. But those people exist anyway, and it's going to happen. But that's it. It's something like, it definitely it's having the kind of ability just to kind of carry one of these around, because when you get many of these, they are bulky. There is something nice about when you have ones that that you're going to want to reference and look at frequently. So for example, the reason I even had this, I just had this next to my desk. It's the only reason I currently, I just up and started this podcast knowing that I just had this book. And the biggest reason is because I've been using this book and I've been looking at it for reference while I'm trying to build a new campaign that I want to do with people just in real life. So outside of the show, and the fact that I've taken this book down here, I've brought it to my room, and I don't need to plug in, and I don't have to look at a tiny phone screen, and I don't have to plug in with my laptop because it doesn't have amazing battery life. Somehow the battery drains like to nothing when it's been shut down, because that's just the way laptops are. Their batteries never fully turn off, apparently, at least that one. So being able just to have this book available to me at all times, because I know that I want to reference it very frequently, is really nice. And it's something that is super helpful. So it kind of rounding up to the beginning of what I said, a lot of it is dependent on what you need. If you want to have a physical book, I think very much now more than ever, it really requires a conversation, because I would argue for the most part, it probably isn't worth getting a book. It probably isn't worth the $20 to get a full price book, outside of maybe for supporting a local game store. The biggest reason that it's nice to be able to, and the reason I kind of always say, don't get a book from Amazon. I pretty much always just say, like, either buy, if you're going to get a physical book, buy one from a game store. A biggest reason is because a lot of that extra cost is going to that game store. You look at something like Amazon, and they're getting that low price because they essentially are, removing a middleman, if you will, right? And that middleman is the game store. Well, that middleman still gets to get the benefit of some of that money, right? It doesn't just, being able to give business to your game store, and then not only that, but then to not give business and play at that game store are both very important. I bought this at the game store that I frequent all the time, and I got really lucky that it was there. I actually didn't pre-order this one. But there's always something valuable to, being just buying products at your local game store, keeping them, keep giving them business, because if you don't, inevitably these places that help foster gaming can go away. And that's not something that anybody wants. And so, that was a big reason of that was the big message, a part of what was Origin Stories, was that these places help foster gaming. And there are a lot of people that can continue to get more and more into these games if they can play in person. And these game stores help foster that. So there's very much something to be said just to even buy them full price, just to support a game store. But in terms of, so you don't have to have a 100-pound backpack, I would have the conversation with yourself. I would be honest. I would be honest with yourself and just be like, what do I really need this book for? Do I just want to buy it so that I can use the magical items, or do I want to just buy it so that I can use, this one, sub race or whatever? Because you can piecemeal these books on D&D Beyond. You can piecemeal the parts that you want. I have bought parts of Source books, a part of the way I bought source books was just to get races, class, subclass options, and items, and then nothing else. Those were the only things I ever got. And that's something that is obviously available and a potential option for people. But, something that's important, I think, is that, if you want to have everything in the book, if a book really seems like something that you truly want. For example, Franny really wanted to do a boat-based campaign, so when this book came out, it was really useful for him. It was something that he wanted, so he got the full version, not only even on this, but even on D&D Beyond, and that was because he wanted something. I wanted to have multiple rule sets from this book, but I didn't really need every part of it. I got it because, again, I saw it was cool. I wanted to get this version because it was there, and and I'm now using more and more parts of it as a result, of just having it around, being able to have it accessible without me having to think about it, because I can just see it's there, right? It forces itself onto my mind. But then, if it's not an adventure book that you plan to run, if it's not a setting that you necessarily care about, for example, a lot of people, that was Ravnica, which is a real shame, but that was the truth for a lot of people, don't get that whole thing. Maybe only get parts of it. Lighten the load at your backpack, but don't forget to get some of the essential things like a real player's handbook, or even, getting an essentials kit so you can at least use like the simple like player's guide, and then just use the digital version of the player's handbook. That's always an option too. But there are definitely needs to get some of the physical objects that exist out there, but one of those is definitely not, some of those definitely aren't for everybody, but they are definitely for someone, and they can be for you. You just have to kind of have that conversation with yourself. All right. And then kind of final note before we wrap up here, as we are pretty much we have reached time, is that So currently I am kind of, currently from my end, luckily, like I said, we were going to be going kind of through boot camps, kind of a boot camp on streaming and kind of helping to make all this stuff come together in that one with Franny tomorrow. However, there is a distinct possibility in the near future that I will be, that I may be distant for some time. Similarly, while as I alluded to earlier, I'm currently, both of us are going to be, attempting to get work so that we can, keep our lives afloat, let alone this show. So you'll have to continue to bear with a lot of the things that we have to do. But honestly, like I mentioned earlier, the one thing that I can absolutely ask for is just you guys to keep supporting us. Let us kind of get through our things. Let us be able to try to make something here that really works by sharing what we do and having people support us one way or another. Even if it's just by subscribing to the channel, following us on Twitch, being a part of Twitch chat, talking with each other, talk about more things that are about D&D itself. It's something that we would love to see. We would love to see happen, and we would love to grow with people. Otherwise, you'll have to kind of deal with some of our growing pains, but if you guys can stick it out with us, I guarantee you it will be worth it. We have the potential of being able to create amazing content, and I would think that some of the content that we've made in the past would be a good indication of that. So I really hope for the best in the future. Otherwise, next episode, Franny will be back, and we'll see you then. So long.